Hello YouTube and welcome back to another week of VCT Pacific Rostermania updates. My name is Will Cho, one of the casters here at VCT Pacific, and finally we have some confirmed big news. Part of it is somewhat rumored throughout, and a lot of people, I think, were kind of making the assumption, but we were just kind of holding off until the official announcement, so we actually have some meat to chew on this week, so let's jump right into it. As always, we have our own handy-dandy sheet just to kind of keep track of what's been going on. For anyone new, here's a little chart here on what's going on, what these colors mean. So the blue means it's a new addition or new change, 100%. Green means that they announced officially that the player will be continuing, but a lot of teams won't necessarily do that if their player is just continuing their contract. So that's only if there was an official announcement. Basically, this is for Lightning Fast because he's the only one that's really happened for so far. Yellow is if we have, kind of these rumors that have been reported on several times, right? Or maybe with some proof. Red means that they're out 100%. And then purple is my personal guesses and or recommendations for teams. You'll notice a couple players are in bold. Those are the new changes for this week. So we see a couple names on Zeta. We see obviously a big new name on Bleed. But everything else, not too many changes from last week, right? Nothing from the top dogs, Paper X, DRX, T1. Again, I don't expect to see any more changes from these teams, at least for the time being. For the case of like T1, they might make one or two changes, right as we get closer to the season starting, where maybe at least trim it down to a 5-man. But other than that, we haven't heard anything further from Gen G yet, other than Texture being announced. I had mentioned last week, I think it would be great to see Bozzy continue on, come over to that roster alongside Texture as well. My mind hasn't changed from that. Now, there are some other rumors about, some of the other Korean players that people are speculating, but we don't really have any proof. But players like Munchkin, etc., could fit very well here. They could. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Nothing further confirmed from Secret yet either, but all eyes are pointing towards Giant Sandy. And then let's jump right into... You know what? No, let's talk about the big news first. Let's talk about Yay to Bleed. All right, so... no, I don't think it's the funniest thing ever. I don't know why that was a thing. But anyway, for those who didn't know, this was supposedly... There was an offer made last year as well. But obviously, at that point, Bleed was not in the partnership program. They were not in the VCT partner system. They were playing in challengers here for the Pacific region, under the MYSG flag, the Malaysia and Singapore region. And then they won Ascension. So now they're coming up into VCT Pacific. They will be that 11th team. And there seems to be some people that weren't following it as closely, which is totally fine because there's a lot of news to follow. But some people were wondering, okay, so they won Ascension and they're like swapping out players. What's going on here? While, yes, there could be a discussion about how that is possible for teams that did win Ascension, but that's a whole different story. In the case of Bleed, what happened was two of their players cannot continue with them, right? I believe one of them, I believe Juicy was actually just too young and then Neff actually had to go to national service. I think we've heard that both of them are probably just going to take this chance to do their national service. Well, Neff has to. So they were losing two players already due to circumstances. So they had to bring in two more. Last week, they had already announced Egoist when we did this update, which I had talked about. I think it's a pretty solid pickup. I mean, already their core has kind of a very solid trinity, I would say, if you want a core 3 out of 5, right? First of all, you have a controller who's very important and an IGL and crazy guy. And then you have Darion, who is quite flexible. I mean, he used to mainly play Duelist. He's been playing more Sentinel towards the end of their run, but he can really go, either way. And I would assume if needed, if he's willing to, I'm sure he would have the skill to pick up other roles as well. I think he's proven that flexibility. So no matter who they picked up, I think it always would have been pretty decent as long as they pick up someone stable. And Egoist has been that player. I mean, he's one of the players individually that continue to give Bleed any trouble that they potentially had in their own region and challengers. So that was a good pickup. It really kind of rounded out and laid a good foundation for the team. Now, that would have put them, for me, at a point where it's like, okay, I think they could still get like 7th, 8th, right? Maybe with some super plays, they make it into playoffs and they could go for a really crazy run. But no matter who they got as their 5th, I thought that was a possibility. Now, we had already been hearing rumors of Ye getting offered again, maybe some other top duelists as well, like Aspas, etc. Bleed was just trying to throw these checks out there, get one of the top duelists in the world. That's the rumors we had been hearing, but we hadn't had confirmation until this week. And now it is official. Ye is joining Bleed Esports, and he will be playing in VCT Pacific. And I'm just going to talk selfishly for a second. I'm just happy that with Ye's return to Tier 1 Valorant, we get to cast him every week at VCT Pacific. I think that's just hype. A lot of the Korean community is very hype about this. The Korean community, the hardcore community that was following Valorant from the beginning, there's a lot of people that were big fans of Ye here in Korea as well. And Ye had always done really good interviews with us as well, whether it was with myself when it was being done all online, or the times that Jen was able to go to the international events and had a chance. Ye always gave really good interviews. He had always talked about how he would love to come to Korea, play in front of a Korean crowd, visit Korea, things like that. So Korean fans were already very, very big fans of him. And then on top of that, obviously, he's very good, so that helps. So, for one thing, I think the Korean fans are like, this is crazy. We get to see Ye here in VCT Pacific. That's nuts. But also for, just talking selfishly, for a lot of us, it's like, yo, we get to be the ones that cast Ye like every week. That's pretty sick. He's a pleasure to watch, always, right? He's always been a pleasure to watch. I mean, just his core mechanics individually have always been very good, and he has his own style too as well, right? As most top players do. So now the big question is of course his run, on challengers in North America didn't go so well. It did not go so well. So the question is okay, well, I mean, individual mechanics, I think we can all agree it's still pretty, it's got to be good from what you see, whether it's on his own streams or even when he was playing there, or before that, obviously very briefly on C9. The question is okay, how do you adapt to the styles over here? How do you adapt with the rest of the team? Right? Because while I think they have a good core, Bleed is not a roster where you would look at it and be like, they're basically, not to compare it to a team that, I'm not trying to make the comparison that Ye used to be on another team, but I'm just trying to pick out a team that I think works best for this, is the old Optic core, right? It's like, okay, well, they clearly have really good structure, they have a very clear vision, etc. Bleed's not quite there yet. I mean, for one, they're younger, right? The experiences are shorter, etc. So the question is how does Ye adapt to that, or how does he fit into that, right? So that's the big question. Now, there have been some extra content around. They had just released, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, a little vlog type content with Ye. I didn't get to watch it yet. And then there seemed to have been another interview with Ominous, who's the analyst for Bleed. And it was mentioned there that they hadn't scrimmed with him at all when the contract was made, when the offer was given and signed. So, I mean, with distance and everything, it's not too shocking, right? I'm sure you just kind of went through it by discussion. But that, it's less for us to chew on, right? It's like, okay, well, I mean, yeah, we all believe the potential of VA. And I think what he brings to this team on paper is amazing, right? He's explosive. He's another person who can just really carry you out of the depths of hell if needed, alongside Scary. He's also quite self-sufficient, because I remember when he was playing on Optic with the Optic core, not only a lot of times would they play to set him up, but sometimes in interviews I'd ask him, like, whose call was that? And he'd be like, well, that was my call. I just said, I'll go and do this, right? And I'll just take care of this part of the area, or I'll go and, like, this is my goal. I'll get this information. So I think that, again, helps Bleed on paper quite a bit. But we all know sometimes it doesn't work out, right? I mean, it's 5 humans playing. Chemistry is a funny thing. Sometimes things don't mix. So that's the only kind of question mark. But on paper, it looks very good. And more than anything, I think a lot of us, whether you were a huge Ye fan, like individually or not, I think you had to agree that Ye was one of, the big stars of early Valorant. We're still in the early stages. But to see him continue once again on a partner team, and in some ways, I'm not saying this because I cast VCT Pacific, but I do think it's kind of more exciting that he's in a region that we haven't seen him play in. We haven't seen a lot of, like, international top stars play in. We know that there are some very different metas and different skill gaps in this region, both above and below, right? So there's different interpretations. So I'm very curious how does he do? Because here's the thing. Ye used to give DRX a lot of trouble, right? DRX used to, one of their biggest flaws was that because they didn't have confidence in their own opping, they never had like a go-to answer to a great opper on the other team. Because worst case, if you have a really confident opper, you can be like, well, it's not like the most ideal, but hey, just like counter op, right? Like buy an attacker op, buy an offensive op, and just duel him. Like that's something you could have done, but because that was never an option for them. So back in the day when they, when CNED used to be on Ascend, the answer for DRX was always, okay, just like figure out where he is and go somewhere else. But then with Ye, it was like, well, sometimes he'd just like walk out, right? And if it's not the op, like with the Headhunter during the Chamber meta, because of Rendezvous, now Rendezvous's changed a bit, and so DRX was like, well, what do we do against this guy? I mean, Ye ruined so many moments for DRX and just the old optic in general. So I'm very curious, right? I'm very curious, how does he impact the top teams of Pacific? DRX, they used to have trouble with this guy. Can they get over that mental block? They've gotten more confident. They've gotten a little looser. Will that assist them? Will Ye still be able to play at his own individual top level regardless of how the team does? And then it's also like, okay, teams like Paper Rex, now you get to face off against, Ye, in the league. How does that work out? Because Ye, again, the way he plays, he's not the one that's like always just running amok and just flicking around getting shots. It's his crosshair placement. It's just this calm and collected, methodical way of playing. And then he's able to do these micro movements where he can still play a bit aggressive, especially when he has things like the Jet Dash or the old Rendezvous, which both of those obviously have been nerfed. So that's something to consider as well. Whereas Paper Rex, they fly around, right? They zoom around. So very curious how this works out. I'm also curious, I mean, so is he going to be the main duelist? Because in this announcement video, let's watch it actually. Let's lower that a bit. Let's bring this up full screen. So they basically put up a trailer for their entire roster. It's actually kind of nice. It's kind of fancy. I dig it. I'm okay with it. So they show Viper, and then it's scary. They also show off the... Well, this is CG, but, the theme shows off the immense amount of money they have. And then they show Silva, which is going to be Crazy Guy. All right, so he's not only the IGL, but the main info initiator. And then here, I think Darion is next? Or was it Egoist? It's Egoist next. They show Deadlock. And then it's Egoist. And they do... Oh, I missed this when I first watched it. It's Chamber driving the car, and then it's Ye who exits, which that is funny. But then they show Breach. Which, I don't know. Is that the actual lore? Like, was he actually just entirely put together as a robot? I didn't know that. And then they show Breach and they show Darion. So if this is a hint at what's going on, it seems like Darion will be moving into a fully flex role. And Ye's... I mean, they're showing Chamber because that's his most iconic thing. But Ye's going to be the main duelist / main opper. I think it's interesting because here's the thing, right? Especially with the Jet Nurse, etc. There are worlds where maybe you want Ye to play that Chamber, or I don't know. Maybe he continued to brush up on the Sentinel role, and maybe he's playing like Killjoy, but he's opping. Like the goal is on this map, Ye is opping. We're trying to get him the op every time, and then it's like, okay, well, especially with the Jet Nurse, and if we're attacking, we can't have him be our main duelist every time because he can't entry. So then Dario can flex to a duelist at entry, because he used to do that, right? So I think the roles work out really well. I think it's very interesting. That's probably just the biggest question I have is Ye going to be more of a main duelist, or is he going to be more of a main opper, or is it just something completely different, right? But with Egoist, I can't imagine that Ye is going to be like the main Sentinel. So there are some curiosities here, but no matter what, I think the roster they have is flexible enough where they can make it work and have some good combos and have some good options. The firepower is also very good, right? The firepower of this team is very good. I mean, even the previous team, the firepower there was no question, it was a very strong team, but I think it's in some ways sturdier, right? I think it has a higher floor here for the 2024 Bleed. So this is all very exciting. But let's be honest, the bottom line is we get to watch EA every week, and for us living in the Pacific region, we get to watch it in a not crazy time zone every week. And now what's even crazier is there is a pretty good chance that we see one of the first ascended teams like make it to the international tournaments right away with this roster. The core was already pretty good. I mean, I think with this three and then like some other two, or even with Juicy and Neff, this would have been a roster where it's like, it's not a miracle that they would make an international tournament, but I do think it would have been a crazy story. But now with Ye and Egoist, I'm like, okay, well, more so Ye, no offense to Egoist, but Ye's just like a big superstar. With Ye, it's like, okay, well, this is like a possibility. It's still crazy. DRX is still a very good team. Paper Race is still a super strong team. But, there's still, that extra slot. So there are some curiosities here. I think it makes Pacific, for one thing, I think it makes Pacific so much more interesting. I think it breathes even new life into Pacific, and we're only into the second year. I think it's also going to create a lot more challenges that teams are going to have to evolve to get over in Pacific, something that Pacific needed. Pacific really needed people that had the firepower to just completely crush those who were not ready to play at the top level, but also to just crush any planning you had done a la DRX. Because DRX's planning was always good, but the problem was when push comes to shove, it's an FPS, and if someone just starts to shoot through your plans and break it apart, what was your backup? And now we're starting to see more players that are going to challenge that. And I think that is very, very interesting. It's very exciting. So that's the Bleed roster. And this, for all intents and purposes, this is confirmed, right? Scary, Crazy Guy, Darian, Ye, Egoist. Lagia is the head coach. Ominous as the analyst. I think they have one or two other coaches, but I'm not quite sure. Who needs roles when you got Scary? But that's the thing. I mean, you have Scary, and then you have Ye. Two guys that we know can clutch, like 1v4s and 1v5s. So that's the other thing, is that this team, maybe the team doesn't seem to work out very well, but maybe these two guys don't get shaken up by the rest of how the things are going with the rest of the team, and they're still able to just carry them out of these situations. So, yeah, I think it's crazy. You are correct. T1 was supposed to be that team that was able to kind of challenge teams in the way they played last year. Obviously, we only had one split, etc., etc. But I think they're kind of just back to that same position. I think the players on this team still have that potential to challenge given metas and given styles and given power levels of Pacific, but they still have to once again gel on their own, figure out their own stuff first, again, with the new additions of King, Excurid, and Izu. But yeah, I mean, listen, you got T1, you got Bleed. I mean, who knows what the Gen G is going to look like, but hey, RRQ with Astrea, and again, we still haven't heard yet with no confirmation, but if Jemkin does join, that's another player that can try to challenge that. It's going to get interesting. So far, I would say, I think in terms of just like stylistic evolution and like which teams grow, which teams don't, in some ways, I think Pacific is going to be the most interesting once again. And part of that is because Pacific started with a lower average, right? A lower floor. But I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's a much more of a curious combination of players and rosters. So I'm very excited for Bleed 2024. I can't wait to watch them in Pacific. I think they are going to breathe some much needed firepower into this league. Let's move on to my other favorite topic that we didn't get to talk about because there was no news for the longest time. It's going to be Zeta Division. And listen, okay, so here's how things started. First of all, Zeta Division, they've been together for a very long time, and they haven't really grown much, right? And they always, we talked about this last week, they always tried for these miracle runs, and part of that is they seem to adapt really late. And then on top of that, there were certain players that like they have these very, very small moments, but it's so few and far in between that it was like, okay, you're also lacking in the firepower department. Now, there were rumors, okay, all players are allow it to like explore options, things like that. And everyone's like, whoa, are they selling off the like entire roster? Like, what are they going to do? Like, are they still sticking with an all Japanese roster? I don't know. So there are a couple things we know. Now, just over the weekend, it was announced that Ten and head coach XQQ, oh, I guess he is red now as well, will be moving into content creation roles under the Zeta Division banner. All right. Now, listen, I'm sure XQQ is very well aware of this. A lot of us thought there needed to be a change in the coaching staff, and I've never had a chance to talk to the guy. Obviously, he was at the helm when they made the miracle run at Masters Reykjavik last year in 2022. So it's not to say that he didn't provide value, but I mean, you know, again, the whole roster stayed together, including the coach, and not much had changed. So something needed to change. But obviously, you know, he's got good history here within the scene and within the team. So, and he does seem to be very keen on like communicating from what I've seen, just with what they try to do with the Japanese audience. So I think content creation, that's a cool idea. Supposedly, he also mentioned that he might return to, you know, the competitive roles at a later time. So, you know, maybe he's just kind of taking a break in his own personal career as well. But then 10 also moving to a content creation role. Now, 10 used to do a lot of content creation more mainly prior as well. And the other thing is listen, I'm not trying to create excuses, and I'm not trying to just like scapegoat something, but you have to imagine it has an impact. For those who don't know, 10 had to get surgery on his eye. So last year, and he had this recovery period. And before that, and from what I can tell, you can tell his movement and his positioning, etc., seems to account for this afterwards. So he's recovered where he can play. It's not like he like can't see out of, you know, one eye, and all of his depth perception is out the window or something like that. I don't know the details, but it is very clear he seemed to have been taking less risks in his play, and he seemed to, for a while, he was playing much less confidently as well. And you just have to imagine that this has an impact. If nothing else, at the very least, the time you took off, the time it takes to adjust, right? Especially because it's literally your vision that you had to get an operation on. It's a lot of things lost that you have to regain and maybe adapt to new ways of playing. And I couldn't help but notice this throughout this year, where it was like, listen, I mean, you can tell he's still a good player, but he's not what he used to be. And maybe it's a matter of having to play differently. Maybe it's a matter of having to play on a different team, right? A different style, different roles. But it just never seemed to be quite the same. I mean, eventually towards the end, they put him back on the Rays, and he seemed to regain a little bit of that confidence, a little bit of that flair. But I think that's part of a big reason, right? And things happened, right? But at the very least, obviously, the operation was successful. I'm glad he recovered well enough to be able to play and still give it a good shot in 2023. But I think both, because here's the thing, if that is a part of it, I think even as a player, it's like, that's got to be so stressful, right? Where you're like, well, there's this thing that I know is kind of creating this extra cap on what I can do. So 10 going to content creation. Listen, I hope he's able to continue to find joy in that realm, because obviously he's done so much for the Valorant scene, especially in Japan. So I think that'd be great. Obviously, Zeta Division, that will help them continue to boost their brand power as well. So I think that's really good. And I said it before, if I thought you were going to make changes on Zeta, I think you had to definitely make changes to Crow. And personally, I think Crow and 10, I think both of them needed to be swapped out for there to be a significant upgrade. And this is just the nature of tier 1 competition, right? It's nothing against these players, but like if you want to compete with Paper X, that's what you needed. And that's what happened, because Crow is now moving to a playing coach position. It's interesting that they specifically said playing coach. So here's my assumption. Here's my assumption. My assumption is they're going to register him as the 6th man, so they still have someone on the bench. But he's gonna be coaching, like, because some people are like, well, is this like old Sentinel Shazam situation where he's like playing and coaching like all the time? Like, is he starting? And I'm gonna assume no, because then there would be like no reason to say that, right? Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think if anything, you would just be like, well, SQQ's moving the content creation, and Crow's actually going to continue to help as, like, you know, return to IGL and continue to help Junior, you know, and helping prepare the team or something like that. I don't think you would use the term he's going to coach or be a playing coach. So I imagine It's just a matter of, hey, that way we can still register someone as a 6-man, although it's not necessary anymore. We still have a backup plan, but he's going to now focus on coaching. However, obviously that's a new venture for him. So Junior's there, who's been working as a coach under XQQ and started to take a little bit more of the reins. Now Junior's going to be the one who kind of helps pave the way for Crow as well to learn and grow as a coach. They can, maybe come up with new ideas as well. So Crow still on the roster, but now under the coaching staff category. Now the question is if Crow is going to be that supposed 6th man, is there really any need to keep Barcy on a contract? I don't know. I mean, unless Barcy's been cooking up some crazy flexibility, the other thing is keeping a Brimstone specialist as your 6th man just doesn't seem, unless there's internal reasons to believe that there was a high chance that Sugar Zero wouldn't be able to play certain matches. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the most flexible 6th man to have. So unless Barcy's been cooking up different roles and he's going to be moved up to a starting position, I imagine, again, nothing against Barcy, but I imagine there's no reason to keep that contract. And I imagine Crow will be moving into that 6th man. Now, I mean, if they have the money and they're like, hey, well, the contract hasn't expired yet, so we might as well keep Barcy, then like, sure. I mean, that's up to you. I don't know the finances for the team, but that's my assumption. And then you have Laz, Depp, Sugar Zero, which I don't think it's confirmed that they are continuing on the team. I think that's still kind of maybe up in the air. Now, there seemed to also be a post for Zeta Division that is looking for an English-Japanese translator. So the question is are they open to having international players on the team, or are they open to having, or are they like looking for international coaching staff? Could go both ways. So that is something to consider as well. But I think steps in the right direction. I'll be honest, I don't know who would fit this very well, assuming that, first of all, let's assume it's still going to be a Japanese roster. I'm not very well versed. Some people seem to have some idea, so I'll look into some of those players that people are throwing names around for next week's discussion. But personally, I don't have anyone that comes to mind where I'm like, well, I definitely think like that player would absolutely be an upgrade for Zeta Division. So questions are in the air, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Because here's the thing: Laz continues to prove his value. Depp continues to prove his value. Sugar Zero had a rough first half of the year, but I think he regained his footing. And he still provides consistent value, even if it's not always kills. So I think this is a decent core, right? Laz, someone who can clutch up, right? It's kind of similar to the Bleed core. I actually think this core might be stronger than this core. But the roles are different as well, right? So Depp I think he's a really good entry. More so than just like a duelist. I think he's a really good entry. And I think if the team is willing to play a little more loose, I think Depp can do even so much more. And Depp has those clutch moments as well, although maybe not as dramatic and not as commonly as Laz. I think Sugar Zero is a very solid controller, and we've seen what solid controllers can do for a team. So I think it's a very good core. I think it's a very, very stable core. But I am curious. But anyway, I think the changes are in the right direction. And I think 2 new players, even if it could be a rockier start, but I think it's going to continue to pave the way for an evolution and upgrade of Zeta Division into 2024. So I'm very excited about this change. I think it's gonna give us a lot more reason to continue paying attention to Zeta Division instead of getting sick of the fairy tale run story. Right? So I think that's really good, both for their own competition, both for their own branding, both for the fans, all of that combined. Other than that, supposedly Talon is trialing, a global roster. Even I guess rumor has it that even Boy is being considered as a player, so that's up there, but no announcements yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Nothing announced for the 5th starting player on Global Esports yet. There are some assumptions about it being an EMEA player, and people are making guesses on who it would be, but we'll have to wait to see. And that's really about it. But very exciting stuff for week 4. So Bleed's roster is completed. DRX, for all intents and purposes, is completed. PaperX is completed. T1 is completed. So that's 4 rosters complete for 2024 so far. And with just those 4, I think it's already going to be a very, very exciting year coming up for VCT Pacific. So, as we do every week, last week I didn't get to put it up on YouTube because I just realized I hadn't switched my camera, so you couldn't really see the rankings on the right side very well, so that's my fault. But let's do this once again properly this time around. And we're already in October. Okay, so let's copy over last week's rankings. Let's see how things have changed. Now, the big changes will be Zeta and Bleed, right? Oh, man. Bleed. I already put them... This was... Now, this... Just a reminder for last week's rankings. This was under the assumption that they do get yay. Now that that assumption is complete, do I boost them further up? I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Yeah, I'm not so sure. The thing is on pure like individual performance, just like roll-to-roll consistency, I think there's a world where Bleed could be ranked higher than RRQ. But I think you also have to consider the fact that RRQ was really close last year to like making it to one of the international events, or this year, I guess. And again, no offense to the players, but like the ones they have replaced are the weakest links, right? So you've now upgraded on the, or supposedly going to upgrade on the individual front. Still, you have a core who gained the experience, further experience from this year. I think the coaching direction is very good as well. But hey, like, I wouldn't be surprised if something like this, like Bleed goes in third, right? I wouldn't be surprised if, for instance, like someone made this ranking. I'd be like, I mean, I think it's a bit of hype and hopium, but I wouldn't say you're crazy. Or, you know, something like this as well. Like any of these, I think any of these 3 could be swapped around for anyone's personal hypium and hopium. In which case, hey, if we're counting hypium and hopium, I'm all for the RQ hopium. Though I will say, I think that, man, am I riding the Bleed hype too much? I don't know. I don't know what T1 style is gonna look like. I'm just my biggest curiosities are both Xcurit and Izu. Like, I don't know, you know, what are they gonna play? How are they gonna incorporate them into the roster, etc. Because I firmly believe Zeta's calling is gonna be better than Crazy Guys. But is it gonna be so much better that they can overcome the firepower of players like Scary and Ye? I rate Scary very highly. Like, I know there's always hype around him, but I'm one of those people that I will always say, like, well, I don't know. I think it's really hard to tell if Scary or Mako is better. Like, that's where I rate him. So let's not get out of ourselves. Let's give the experience, right? Still the benefit of the doubt. I actually think at this point Zeta deserves to move forward a bit. Global Esports, I mean, I've been thinking about this a long time. Benkai Blaze King Rest lightning fast. I just don't know. The thing is talent is such a big question mark. I mean, I think it'd be pretty fair to swap these two for the time being. Yeah, I don't know. I think I personally rate Jip Boys and Garnets very high as well for talent, so I think they have so much potential, but potential is very different from execution. Here's the thing, though. Listen, I think Zeta moves up quite a bit, actually. I think Talon can be better than this. I think Talon should be better than this. But we just have no idea, right? We just have no idea. So just to talk about why I suddenly put Zeta over Gen G. Now, I think Zeta, they correctly identified their weakest links. So you have to believe, even if we don't, I can't make guesses on who it's going to be. You have to believe that they're looking to make upgrades, or at least long-term upgrades, right? People who have shown even more potential. On top of that, I will say, I think this core of Last Depth Sugar Zero, I'm just going to say it, I think they have a much better mental than Meteor and Texture. Meteor especially. Meteor puts so much pressure on himself that I think that breaks his mental quite a bit. So at that point, okay, if you both have like a pretty strong core and then, you know, 2 or 3 players that we're not quite sure about yet, if push comes to shove, right, you have to make another like lower bracket run, etc. I'm putting Zeta over Gen G. I'm putting Zeta over Gen G. So I think they start to edge because they've gotten rid of their weakest links. Which, that makes it sound very brutal, but because of that alone, I think suddenly the mental value and the experience that these 3 players have boosts them back forward. Yeah, Global Esports, I mean, again, it kind of depends on that 5th player. Someone was talking about the potential. I had read somewhere, like, why isn't anyone considering Yugi? Which I think that would be really interesting. I don't think he's been announced to any of the EMEA Tier 1 teams yet either, right? That could be something worth looking into. But until then... yeah, I mean, I'm counting Team Secret pretty high, but I think, you know, I think they're going to be stronger. But I do think they need to make probably 1 or 2 more changes to really break through the next tier. But I think they can still be top 6 pretty consistently. Man. Okay, but imagine this is how it happens. I mean, we're only in week 4 of Rostermania, but let's say Paper X, CRX, they're still top 2. But then RQ finally breaks through. I am a bit of a fanboy. They finally break through. They go to international tournaments. They become top 3 in Pacific. That's insane. T1... still strong, still sturdy, but now with, you know, players like Scared and Izu, you're like, okay, we see the potential. Hopefully it's a long-term project. That's cool. But then Bleed shows up and they say, don't laugh at, you know, don't ignore challengers, don't ignore tier 2. I mean, if I'm ranking them 5th, they could very easily go to international tournaments. That'd be crazy. Zeta, the ranking would be lower than what a lot of people would hope for, given their history, but I think the way they get there might look better. I mean, this could be insane. This could be insane. Honestly, no matter what the remaining roster changes are, I think this general like tier of teams, right? Like the if you divide it into like 3 tiers, or maybe just, you know, top 6, bottom 5, things like that, I think it's gonna start to look very similar to this. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. So I'm very excited about these changes so far. But yeah, Bleed. The roster's complete. It looks very good. It's very exciting. They're joining Pacific for the first time, and they're gonna come out swinging. I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see how it goes. And I'm keeping my eye on the 2 blank spots on Zeta. That's my next big thing. I think my next big question now is Zeta, and then Gen G, just because the question marks are so big. Talent's question marks very big too, but it's like too big to the point where I just have no idea. Whereas Gen G, especially with it most likely being a Korean roster, I can wager some guesses. So yeah, those are the next teams I'm looking forward to hearing news from. Well, that's it for week 4 of VCT Pacific Rostermania. Some solid news this week. You know, I expect maybe another week or 2 of kind of quiet moments, but especially with off-season, you know, third-party tournaments coming up here and there and being finalized, things like that, I think we're going to start to see more teams that really solidify, because, you know, the off-season is long, but the earlier you can get started on adjusting to a new region, if you're bringing in players from other countries, scrimming together, things like that, it's going to matter. So keep your eyes peeled, your ears open for more news. We'll go over all the news that happens next week for week 5. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion today. Let me know what you guys think about Ye joining Bleed Esports. Let me know who you think should join Zeta Division to make an upgrade for 2024 alongside the 3-man core. down in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all next week for more VCT Pacific Rostermania discussions. See you then.